Liquid culture is an amazing tool to have if you're studying or growing fungi. It has a number of benefits, including being able to bypass the germination time that you would have with spores, and being able to have a jar of specific genetics ready to go whenever you need them. That's why I want to share this basic 2-ingredient recipe that gets unbelievable results without the need of all the expensive lab gear. Now, to get this, we're going to need some equipment, and I like to keep things as simple and cheap as possible. Now, that being said, you will still need a pressure cooker or an instant pot, which will be the most expensive item that we're going to be using. However, I found one cheap on Facebook Marketplace. Now, some other important items include these silicone self-healing injection ports. These will allow you to inoculate the jar with an existing liquid culture that you may have, and it will also allow you to extract from the jar of new liquid culture that you've created. The other items that you'll need will be a jar with a lid, and also something to puncture a couple of holes in that lid as well. I use a screwdriver. Digital scales, and the 2 ingredients that I use are agave nectar and then light malt extract powder. I also put a piece of tumbled sea glass in the jar as well, as this will help break up the mycelium later on once it starts growing. I also heard that chlorine in tap water can affect the results, so I use filtered tap water. I start with prepping the jar lids, and I do this by first puncturing a hole with this random metal skewer thing that I don't know where it came from, but I'm glad I've got it. I then make the hole slightly larger with a small screwdriver, and then I bore out the hole with a pair of scissors to make it slightly larger. Now, a drill would probably be a much better tool for this, but I like to make my life hard. I then clean my greasy fingerprints off of the lid so I can securely fit the self-adhesive injection port. I make sure to firmly press it down to activate the pressure sensitive adhesive. I then make a second smaller hole on the lid to allow for air exchange, and I cover this with a couple of layers of micropore tape. It isn't always necessary to have an air exchange port, but if you're storing the jar for a long period of time, the mycelium does need oxygen. I now measure out my ingredients to a ratio of 1 gram agave to 100 milliliters of water and 0.33 grams of light malt extract to 100 milliliters. I make sure that everything's well mixed together, and then I fill up my pressure cooker with water. But before I can put the jar in the pressure cooker, I loosen the lid and cover it with tin foil. This will make sure that too much pressure doesn't build up inside the jar, causing it to break. This tinfoil hat will also stop the government from reading its mind. I think the recommended cook time is 30 minutes at 15 psi, but I don't believe my cooker gets up to that pressure, so I do it for around 45 minutes. Once the 45 minutes was up and the cooker depressurized, this happened.
Disaster.
Yep, I'd fucked it and blown the arse out of the jar. I'm not entirely sure why this happened, but I suspect I may have tightened the lid as I lowered the jar into the cooker. Either that or the jar was experiencing a rough breakup and was feeling fragile already. Regardless, I now had to devour a jar of pickled beetroot, so I had a vessel to fit the lid that I'd already prepped. And now, after running through the whole process again,
It's alive. Oh shit.
so you can hear, now that I've tightened the lid, it's just forcing air out of that little tiny hole so no contaminated air will be going inside it. It actually worked, and I have myself a nice jar of sterile sugary liquid that I can now inoculate with whatever liquid culture that I want by using the injection port on top. This is one of the jars that I inoculated a few weeks ago, but within just 48 hours I already saw mycelium floating around inside the liquid. I really like this basic recipe and I'm sure I'll be using it a lot more, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and to know what recipes you use as well. And if you liked the video, make sure you hit that dislike button. Until the next one, love ya, bye.